Good morning. Wonderhussy here, camping at a place called Sarcobatus Flat. At least I think that's how you pronounce it. Sarcobatus Flat, Sarcobatus Flat. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think it's kind of a funny name for this vast, mysterious, dry lake bed, kind of on the Nevada side of Death Valley, but basically in the middle of nowhere. Okay, that's US 95 that goes from Vegas to Reno, over that way, on the other side of Sarcobatus Flat, and then over there is the road that goes to Scotty's Castle in Death Valley. Okay, the road that's been closed for, golly, almost 10 years. And I guess it got washed out in a monsoon storm. I'm not kidding, something like 10 years ago. And it's been closed ever since. Also over that way is the Hard Luck Castle. Apparently that's the Castle District. Scotty's Castle and the Hard Luck Castle, which you might remember from some videos I made. I used to go up there and hang out with the guy Randy who built it. Then he sold it and it became an Airbnb. But anyway, all that's going on over there, but I'm just hanging out here on this beautiful dry lake bed, which sadly I think is slated to be covered by solar panels. Okay, I think there's a plan to build one of those vast solar fields out here. And, you know, they build those out in the desert a lot because they go, oh, well, there's nobody out there. Who cares? Well, some of us care. I was always curious to come out to this dry lake bed, and so I figured I'd better do it before it gets covered in panels. And so here I am, my lonely little rig, looking like a tiny dinghy in a sea of, well, a sea of nothingness and Sarcobatus. Okay, come to find out, greasewood, I think it's also called smoke bush. Greasewood is a common plant out here in the desert, and apparently the official Latin name for it is Sarcobatus vermiculatus, or Sarcobatus vermiculatus. I don't know, I don't have cell signal here, so I can't look it up, but I think that's greasewood right there. It's a little scrubby bush that grows out in the desert, and apparently it's toxic, so don't try to make any tea out of it, and don't let your animals graze on it, which was actually an issue for the white man when he first started making his forays into this vast and mysterious part of the country. Oh, look at my campsite. Don't you just love a great minimalist campsite, especially a great minimalist campsite on a day like this when it's overcast and it's so still and so silent out here. Completely amazing. It's kind of like when it snows and it's that super duper silent calmness because of the, I guess, sound dampening acoustic effects of the clouds. Oh, it's just a wonderful place to camp. Another thing that I'm curious about on this Sarcobatus Flat is supposedly you can see those sailing stones like out on the racetrack playa. Okay, everyone's seen those pictures of those mysterious moving rocks, they call them sailing stones, on the racetrack playa in Death Valley proper, which is just over that way. And I guess they did finally figure out what causes those rocks to move, creating these tracks in the desert. Well, come to find out, I guess when it rains sometimes in the winter, a very thin sheet of ice will form on top of this parched, dry lake bed. You know, it's real hard packed, so when a thin layer of ice forms on it, I guess these little stones get blasted along by these extreme gusts of winds that we get out here. I mean, if you've ever been out here, you know how windy it gets, and apparently some of these gusts are enough to scoot the rocks along the surface of the ice, and it creates these little mysterious tracks that when the ice melts and everything dries out, it looks like, how did these rocks move on their own? Could it be aliens? Well, no, it's not aliens. It's just ice and wind. Anyway, supposedly you can see rocks like that out on this lake bed, but all I'm seeing right now are some tire tracks. Unfortunately, there are yahoos who like to go driving around on these dry lake beds when they're wet and muddy, leaving, well, I mean, it's not terrible scars, but I don't know. That's the neat thing about the racetrack play, because you're not allowed to drive on it, and it's so remote that even if you did want to drive on it, well, it'd be a major expedition just to get out there. the racetrack play is perfectly smooth. Now this lake bed isn't that hard to get to. Like I said, it's right off 95, right off the road to Scotty's Castle. In fact, they call the intersection of these two roads Scotty's Junction. Anyway, it's pretty easy to get out here, and that's why you can see all these tire tracks. And I don't know, I haven't seen any sailing stones. I mean, there's not a whole lot of stones out here to begin with. You know, it's mostly just this flat surface, and that's not even a stone. I think that is burrow poop. Nice dried out cake of burrow poop. It's what's for breakfast. Anyway, apparently somewhere out here, if I was to explore the entire lake bed, I might be able to find some of these sailing stones. But you know what? That would be kind of fun, but I think there's something even more interesting on this lake bed. And it goes back to what I was saying about the days when the first white men started making their first forays out into this part of the country. So let me go back to my camp, get myself together, and let's go exploring the area around Sarcobatus Flat. Okay, we've arrived at the first thing I wanted to check out here. And you can probably tell by the bits of rusted metal detritus that we are at the site of something made by the white man in his infinite wisdom as he was settling the vast deserts of the American West. And this is something called Thorpes Well. Although it doesn't look very much like a well to me, that looks more like the foundation for a stamp mill, which apparently this guy Thorpe, that was his name, came here in the late 1800s to work, I guess, gold prospects in the area. And he came out here to this, well, I guess there's a natural spring here called, well, it was called Stinking Spring. Oh, wow, look, there's a campsite here. I could have just camped right here at the site of Thorpes Well, which is what they renamed it from Stinking Spring, because I guess Stinking Spring wasn't exactly luring a bunch of settlers up here. I'm not sure where the well would have been. I mean, there's not even a ton of vegetation over here, so golly, maybe the name Stinking Spring was very apt. You know, on the edge of one of these alkali lake beds, I would think the water wouldn't be the best to drink, but I don't know, somewhere out here there was a stinking spring, and this guy, Thorpe, not only used the water to, I guess, live off of, he also operated a stamp mill. He did build a stamp mill out here, of which you can see a few foundations remain to this day. How about that? He was out here in the 1880s, I think, so it's like almost 150 years later. You can still see the foundations of what this guy was doing, and moreover, look at that. I mean, you can even see, sorry about my shadow, his old stone retaining wall that he built. I mean, I guess this is kind of like a wash coming down from the mountain, so I don't know, maybe there was a spring down here at some point. I sure don't see anything now, though. I mean, there's a couple bushes over there. I suppose there might be some kind of little seep, but other than that, this is what you might call an arid environment. But despite the fact that this was such an arid environment, white people did come out here and try to settle this area. You can see there's actually a number of old stone foundations crumbling into the desert sands here, but, well, this was essentially what became the ghost town of Bonnie Claire. Okay, you may have seen Bonnie Claire marked on a map just outside Death Valley National Park. Well, there's not a whole lot left. And what we're looking at here is basically just the ruins of old Guy Thorpe's well. Although, look at all this beautiful broken glass glittering in the sun, that beautiful blue color. I mean, golly, these people were living rough if this was considered a dwelling. But like I said, this is just Thorpes Well and the stamp mill area. The rest of the town of Bonnie Claire is a little bit farther down the road that way, and I think there are actually a few more substantial ruins, so I'm gonna get back in the rig and keep on cruising down this lonely dirt road deeper into the middle of nowhere. Let's go see what we can find of Bonnie Clare. Have arrived in the metropolis of Bonnie Clare, and there are a number of noteworthy things still standing here, including an old house, the ruins of, I don't know, an old mill or mine site. Looks like there's a little grave over here. Ooh, nothing like a lonely desert grave. It says R.I.P. Sammy Smiles, aka Samu Cow, the best bulldog ever. Aww, look at that. Somebody made this awesome grave for their deceased bulldog. Wow, it's such an interesting bright pop of color in this otherwise very, well, I hesitate to say drab, but monochromatic landscape. And it must be pretty fresh because all these bright colorful flowers haven't faded in the desert sun yet. So, oh golly. Oh, look, here's pictures of the dog. Oh, look, beware of wiggle butts. Oh, look at Sammy. Samuka. Looks like a very sweet dog. And this is a very sweet way to commemorate the dog. But there's also supposed to be another grave in this area of a little pioneer girl who died here way back in the early 1900s. And I kind of want to find that grave, because I actually brought something to put on it. Okay, just like I did at that dead prostitute's grave in Rhyolite, I have one of those golden space roses that I thought would be nice to leave on the grave of little Dorothy Patno, which was the name of this poor little girl who apparently was dragged out to this godforsaken part of the country by her parents back in, well, she was born in 1906 in Dalhart, Texas. Y'all ever heard of Dalhart, Texas? I actually have, because it's one of the epicenters of the Dust Bowl back in the 1930s. Well, Dorothy Patno's family left Dalhart before the Dust Bowl, way before the Dust Bowl. They ended up out here. I guess her dad was probably some kind of miner or prospector. And, well, unfortunately, she died of scarlet fever in 1911. Way out here on the edge of Sarcobatus Flats. Boy, talk about a lonely grave. Anyway, I thought it might be nice to try and find her grave and leave this beautiful golden space rose on it. Okay, if you're wondering what a golden space rose is, it's a 24 karat gold foil dipped rose sent to me by a viewer that I was somehow led to believe had been launched into space by some college kids somewhere. But when I actually took the time to look it up online, I think it's just a novelty gift sold on Amazon. Whatever, it's still pretty, shiny, and fancy enough for a lonely little grave in the middle of nowhere. And apparently this grave is not at the location that it's pinned at on Google Maps. But I did find the exact coordinates. Oh, maybe that's it. Oh, yeah, that looks like a lonely gravesite. Actually, it looks like there's two people buried here. Oh, it's a lonely cemetery. Okay, here's the grave of Dorothy Ione Patno, born in Dalhart, Texas, February 6, 1906, died April 4th, 1911 in Bonnie Clare, Nevada. That's the name of this ghost town, and I don't think Bonnie Clare even lasted very long. I want to say it was only around for like 8 years. I think by 1911, everybody had already picked up stakes and moved on and abandoned it. I think it survived a little bit longer as a sort of way station when they were bringing supplies in to build Scotty's Castle. Okay, remember I said Scotty's Castle is just right down that, well, it's a highway now, paved road. Well, partially paved, and it's still closed because the Park Service is dragging ass reopening Scotty's Castle. Anyway, this Bonnie Clare did survive a little bit longer as a kind of like a supply way station, but you know, Scotty's Castle, when that was done, being built in the, what, 1930s, it just faded away into nothing. So poor Dorothy Patno's grave She's just kind of out here. Well, not by itself. There's one other person to keep her company for all of eternity. And that looks like Dora C. Well, unfortunately, the sign's rusted, so I can't see. Black, maybe, was her last name. Looks like she was born in 1898 and died. Well, unfortunately, that's also lost to the sands of time. Or, I guess, the rusts of time. But so she was born in 1898. Dorothy Patno was born 1906. So she was 8 years older than little Dorothy. Who knows? Maybe they actually knew each other. Anyway, I'm going to leave this space rose on the grave of... Oh, gosh, now I feel bad. Like, you know how little girls are. If one gets a golden rose, then they both have to have a golden rose. Well, I do have one more golden rose in my car. I guess I could leave them both here. Whew. Well, I don't know. I mean, I just know how it was for me and my sister growing up. If somebody gave her a golden space rose, well, I sure would have wanted a golden space rose too. Anyway, I will go ahead and put one of these golden space roses on the grave of little Dorothy Patno next to this really sad teddy bear somebody left for her years ago. I mean, golly, the thing is like rock hard from being rained on and all the dust that's collected. And it looks like somebody left a little chess piece there too. And somebody left, look at that, somebody left a little toy. Oh, somebody put flowers. It's really cute. Look, there's a butterfly. And now there's also a golden space rose. What's that? Uh-oh, sounds like Dora wants a space rose too. Okay, Dora. Meanwhile, poor little Dora Black's grave doesn't have anything on it more than this old boot. Well, we'll soon fix that. I'm gonna have to go ahead and climb onto her grave to do this. Apologies, Dora. But if you want a space rose, well, you're just gonna have to pardon me stepping on your grave and poking a hole into it. There. Finally, I actually had to go get my hammer for this. This ground is real hard, but now little Dora C. Black, I'm gonna assume that was her name, and Dorothy Patno both have roses on their graves. And so now they won't have to squabble for eternity. Let it never be said that I'm not a fair person. R.I.P. Dorothy Portno and Dora Black. Okay, now let's go check out this house. Oh my gosh, guess what? This busted old abandoned house turned out to be one of the neatest, most interesting places I've ever explored in the entire Mojave Desert. And so rather than try to cram everything into one video, you're just gonna have to wait till next week for part 2 of the mysteries of Sarcobatus Flat, the House of Quotes. Stay tuned.